ciegos hablan más de lo que escuchan, eso es un problema, ¿no? Que tenemos que considerar.
Kevin, are we ready? All right. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We'll call this meeting to order of the Vision for Excellence in Education and Arkansas Accountability System Steering Committee. And we have a very full agenda today. I would like to start with the minutes of the last meeting. Anyone have any comments, questions, or corrections for the minutes? If there are none, do I have a motion that the minutes be approved?
Mr. Chair, I move that the minutes from the last meeting be accepted.
All right, motion by Ms. Flowers. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, have a second. Saw Ms. Hayward. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye. Are there any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Move directly to the next agenda item, and that is Dr. Richard Abernathy is going to present the AAEA, Arkansas Association for Educational Administrators, Vision for Excellence in Arkansas Education, and you all should have a copy of their printed document at your place. Dr. Abernathy, welcome, as always, and you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Committee, for allowing us to make a presentation to this great group of advisory that's going to be leading our direction for ESSA for the next many, many years when they draft a plan. You should have in front of you a paper copy of the vision. And this actually, just give me a little background, but this actually started well over a year ago. After the last legislative session, administrators got together and they felt like that they needed to put forth a plan on how to improve and reform education, because there are many other groups out there that have their plan. And so we started working on that. It took input from a lot of different people, a lot of different administrators, from a variety of assistant principals through superintendents, and anywhere in between. You can see the title of this, and it's kind of ironic because it seemed like we all come up with very similar titles. I think ours was first, by the way, Commissioner. But it's a vision of excellence for Arkansas education, a perspective from within. Because when you think about it, if you really want to improve education, who is better and more knowledgeable in that area than us, than educators? And we need to be the leaders on this issue on how to move education forward. So with that being said, I have a presentation. And believe me, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but I do want to go over a couple of topics on that presentation with you.
I think our tech folks are working on microphones. I think Dr. Abernathy's ready to bring up his, there we go.
But
does that look right?
I'd be glad to do that one, but that one's not mine.
That was. Click.
Punch it?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. And I'd be glad, I did not give you a copy of this presentation. I'd be glad to send that to you electronically, or Ms. Smith has that available for you. So I'm not going to read all this to you because I'm going to be respectful of your time. But you can see it started well over a year ago, and kind of how we got there. But before that, it is very difficult for me to stand in front of schools and stand in front of audiences and not brag on the job public schools are doing right now. Folks, Arkansas education and education around the nation, we're doing a better job now than we've ever done in the history of education. Our population is more diverse, we have more issues, we have more difficulties to overcome. But when you look at all sorts of statistics, I think the statistics speak for themselves. Graduation rates are higher, mediation rates are lower. When you look at NAEP scores, and I don't know if you've seen the Breaking the Curve report, but we're doing very well when compared to other schools in the nation. You look at the success on closing the achievement gap, and we continually hear that we've not closed the achievement gap, and in fact, we've closed it between poverty and non-poverty in black and white in every tested area on the NAEP. In ESPN 2000, 2013, have we closed it? Absolutely not. Are we improving it? Yes, we are. We're not finished though. If you look at AP exams, concurrent credit, I mean the progress we're making in those areas is just remarkable. 45,000 credit hours in AP exams resulted in $11 billion in tuition savings. Look at the concurrent credit down there. 116,000 hours of concurrent credit. This is phenomenal. And I'm getting in personal stories on that, but I won't. Kids Count report. Arkansas may gain 3 out of 4 measured education areas. Reading proficiency, math proficiency. The only thing we're not making progress on is the number of kids in pre-K programs. So with that, we have 3 actual areas that we focused on as a group. And you can see the first one, developing a student-centered environment. We can talk about the whole child. And every one of these 3 different areas is broken down to 2 segments. One, it is things that schools should be doing. And when we say schools should be doing it's within their control. Okay, they can adjust their budgets, they can adjust their staff, they can take a look at their resources, but it's within the school's control. Another area is policy recommendations. That's things outside of the control of schools. It's things that we need help on, either through the department, through legislators, through some other mechanism, but it's outside the school district's control. So if you look at this first one, and when you're looking at the whole child, our kids have different issues now than what they did 10 years ago, what they did 15 years ago. Our teachers are dealing more in the classroom than what they have in forever. Our families are dealing with more situations at home than what we have. So it's a societal issue, but that has direct implications on what schools should be done and what policymakers have to consider. So when we look at some things that schools should be doing, an RTI program. It doesn't have to be RTI, but it has to be some type of intervention program. Schools right now are supposed to have an intervention program, but we're talking about a robust program. What are we doing with those kids that are falling through the cracks? How are we helping them? How do we help them get back to grade level? Districts that are doing a good job of it, we want to see that continue. If districts are not doing a good job, they need to evaluate how they're handling students falling through the crack and what they're doing about it, what interventions they have available for those students, as well as families. Some other things that should be done, encouraging parent community engagement through outreach programs. Folks, if any of us had a magical cure for that, we wouldn't be dealing with a lot of the issues that we have to deal with now. I know on the listening tours, that also, I won't say I was just bottom line, we need more people in our community engaged in this process, engaged in school, engaged in policy making, because that's the only way we get involved. But it's difficult to get people to engage. They need to look at, schools need to be aware of the importance of student and staff attendance. Chronic absenteeism, and I was glad to see the department put out a memo yesterday or the day before talking about chronic absenteeism, grade level reading. It's very important. And you may have a 94, 95% attendance rate and think, well, we don't have a problem. Well, when you dig down in that data a little bit deeper, you may have a lot of kids missing more than 10% of the school year, which falls into chronic absenteeism problem, and you do in fact have a problem because the research is very clear. Those kids are going to have a hard time graduating and moving on to be productive. Bringing social networks together. I remember the first time I hired a social worker for a school district, my first thought was, why do we need one? And after they've been there for about 6 hours, I thought we need a dozen of them. The resources that outside personnel and outside experts can bring to a school district and bring to your families and bring to your kids is unbelievable. Schools do not have the capacity to do that by themselves. So social workers, behavioral specialists, those issues that are outside of school that they have a hard time or may not have the training to bring forward, we need to consider them being able to hire those folks. For a school district's perspective, they need to consider those type of things. Providing quality PD for educators, and I know this has kind of been cut the last couple of years, but it's not something that would be supported by research. The research is clear. Our teachers need training. They need up-to-date training, but it needs to be quality. And I think we erred on the side of quality versus a number out there. CTE opportunities. I think our schools are doing a much better job providing CTE opportunities. Again, if they're not, it's some of the things they need to consider as they continue working their budget and working for future plans. Some of the areas that schools are, we're talking about high quality early childhood programs. Some schools have that, some don't. If they don't, again, they need to look at that and consider if that's going to be a fit for their community. Some policy recommendations. We think a COLA is absolutely essential to maintain what we're doing now. If you look at COLA for foundation funds as well as categorical funds, we think policymakers should consider. We have universal access for quality pre-K, and that's probably misworded. What we're talking about is universal access for pre-K kids for those who need it. And we are not talking about mandating pre-K for every 4-year-old in the state of Arkansas. So I'm going to be clear about that because it has created some confusion. But we do have kids who need quality pre-K programs, and we think that that's something our policymakers need to consider. Investing in CT opportunities. And I think our legislature is considering that now, and I know Senator English has been a champion in that area. Eliminating certification restrictions that hinder employment of quality CTE instructors. Commissioner Key, Dr. Childers has done a good job at trying to eliminate some of those barriers, but still, why should schools have to jump through hoops? If they have someone who can really teach a CTE program that might not meet all the criteria, there shouldn't be a lot of hoops they have to jump through to provide those opportunities for those kids. Look at graduation requirements with CTE opportunities in mind, and integrating some of the core subject area within those courses. Some kids are not able to take those particular courses even though they want to go in those fields because they can't meet all the graduation requirements. I know there's been some work being done on that as well. Invest in resource career counselors, social workers. We've already talked about that some. That's something policymakers should consider because, again, our families, our kids, our communities have changed in the last 10, 15 years. Continue allowing the district's flexibility. Folks, that's been one of the best things that's happened in the last couple of years legislatively and state policy-wise, is allowing schools some flexibility to do some things that they haven't been able to do in the past. Can flexibility go too far? Possibly. But while we're working out there, let's give districts a chance to do some things differently to take care of their identified needs in their community. One of the things that we would like to see is more focus on college credit and industry certifications while still in high school. We take right now in CTE courses, and many of those courses have end-of-course exams, which as far as the business world out there doesn't mean a whole lot. So if we're going to evaluate schools, let's evaluate on how many kids are graduating, how many kids are going to college, how many kids have earned some type of career certification, and et cetera. So we think that's one of the things that needs to be considered. One of the issues, the second issue, is talking about attracting and developing, supporting, retaining quality teachers. Folks, this is an area that if we don't all focus on as school people, as college professors and universities, and as policymakers, then we're in trouble. I know you've seen the numbers, so we're not going to repeat those. But if we can't get quality people in front of those kids in a respectable career with a wage that they don't have to go home and take on a second job, we have failed, and we failed those kids. So let's talk about a few things. I'm not going to talk about the numbers again. What should schools do? Well, one thing we think schools do is support principal in both roles of instructional leaders and building managers. If you look at the Forward Arkansas report, this is one of their goals as well. The principal's job has dramatically expanded over the last decade. So we're asking the principal to be an instructional leader. They're also trying to maintain their building. So we're saying as school districts, you need to evaluate the role that's been placed on that building level principals. And if there's things locally they can move off their plate, move it off and assign it to someone else. But free up that building principal to make some of those decisions. Again, quality PD. We think that's vitally important. Stress the importance of PLCs, professional learning communities. You don't learn any better than you learn from each other. I mean, that's how teachers learn, that's how administrators learn, it's from each other. Because you can take any educational preparation program you want, but if it's not boots on the ground knowledge with examples on someone who's been there, it doesn't equate as well. So PLC, sometimes our teachers are asked to do that after hours, after school, kind of on their own time, and it's not real organized. That's not effective either. There needs to be a time in the school day that those teachers have an opportunity to work together in a true professional learning community to improve their strategies. Provide competitive teacher salaries within their constraints of their local budgets. If our school's not focused on trying to pay their teachers as much as we possibly can, we think that's a mistake. We think teachers need to be paid as much as they can. We also understand that former superintendent, there are constraints and limited on their budget. And it seems like there's more and more constraints in that area. Encourage, identify mentor teachers and leaders as quality administrators. Many of our current administrators got administration because someone encouraged them at some point to get administration. Said, hey, you're doing a good job. We think you'd make a good administrator. Encourage them to go back to school. We think our schools ought to be considering that as well. And if they're not, they should. Grow your own. Kind of like what we've been talking about, growing your teachers. We need to be growing your own administrators as well. Maintain flexibility. Policy recommendations. So this goes back to the department and our legislators. Maintain flexibility in NSLA rules. Provide additional resources through the funding matrix for additional building level administrator. And again, you said, well, you put it in funding matrix, you can't make them spend it there. We don't want the matrix to be a spending model, but instead let's change the standard for accreditation. And you can, in fact, enforce those rules if you change the standards for accreditation. Provide statewide consistency in educator preparational programs. Right now, there's not a lot of consistency in those programs. I know there's some work being done in that area, but we would like to see more work and more consistent student and leaders coming out of those programs. I know we have some teachers that are some programs that spend a lot of time on tests. So when those candidates come out to the building level, they're very aware of tests, the terminology, the language, the requirements, the forms, and how to improve their instruction. We have other teachers that come out of those programs and they might spend 15, 20 minutes on tests and never seen Bloomboard or some of the other issues. And so schools are having to spend a lot of time going back and reteaching those particular skills that should be handled elsewhere. Raise and maintain average teacher salaries. We think this is very important. Our status in the SREB states have been reduced. The disparity in salaries across the state has not been lowered at all. It's very difficult when a teacher in one part of the state can teach their entire career and retire and then not make what the beginning teacher salary in another part of the state makes. So we have to reduce that disparity somehow. Streamline educator certification process in high need, high demand areas such as special education. Increase the funding matrix, provide adequate resources to meet current standards for accreditation for districts less than 500. Our current matrix does not follow our standards for accreditation. I know the courts have blessed it, but as anything's been blessed, you also realize at a later time that there's flaws in it. There's flaws in the recommendation from Auden and Picus back when they first did it, back on the recalibration, and even on the last study back in 2014. The entire system needs to be looked at, and we'd certainly be willing to do that. Develop enhanced lottery scholarships for education majors in shortage areas. If you're trying to attract and retain teachers, well, first thing, let's talk about attracting them. Folks, we have to get quality teacher candidates in that field. We have a lottery scholarship out there, so why don't we have a policy that allows an enhanced lottery scholarship? Instead of just qualifying for a lottery, let's say you qualified instead had a 3.25 or a 3.5 as a junior or senior in college. Let's give you an enhanced lottery scholarship if you're in those areas that it's identified the department that's a high need area. Then that may change every year, every couple of years. But special ed, we know we can't find special ed teachers. Well, let's give an incentive to become special ed teachers. Let's give an incentive to be a science teacher, a math teacher, or other areas identified as a high need area. What about educational loan forgiveness program or scholarship program? Again, selected students in areas of high need, let's give them a loan to go ahead and finish their degree and then go to some geographical region in the state that's been identified by the department and allow them to teach there for 5 years and that loan be forgiven. There's ways to do that. There's ways to incentivize people to go to areas of the state. It's not going to work for everyone, but if they don't go, then pay the loan back. What about tax relief? We want to pass all kinds of tax increases, tax cuts. Let's give teachers a tax cut. Let's give them some tax relief. And you can do that in a variety of ways. Provide reduced tuition, again, for high needs, high areas that's identified by the state. So there's ways to attract the best and the brightest, and I would encourage this group and the state board and our policymakers to consider those out-of-the-box type thinking to get them there. Developing a shared accountability plan. I know this group is really going to hone down on accountability as ESSA, and I think a lot of this ties in directly with ESSA. When you're talking about accountability, one of the things that we will always say, hold educators to the highest degree that's allowable. We should be accountable for educating kids. However, don't tie our hands behind our back when we do it. Give us flexibility to be able to do that. At the same time, governance needs to provide adequate resources to adequately educate kids. So educators can fail, policymakers can fail, or we can both be successful as we try to improve education and move forward. So what should schools do in this area? Well, first of all, determine student success by multiple measures. Sometimes we've been determining student success by how many kids we're sending to college. Well, that doesn't fit success for all kids. By the same token, if none of your kids are going to college, or if they're not prepared to go to college, that's not successful. But every kid is different. And let's meet those kids where the needs are and where the desires are and what's going to fit them. At the end of the day, we would like to see a kid having a career and a job in a worthy place and paying taxes. That's what we'd like to see instead of us funding them. We have to protect the instructional day. A lot of times as superintendents, we'll complain about our instructional day being infringed upon, and then we turn around and look and we're turning out school 3 days a week for pep rallies. We have to protect the instructional days. Our school people have to protect our instructional day. We just need to be aware of that. And I'm not saying pep rally is not important, but it is. If we're not conscious, we're losing instruction time based on our local decisions. Encourage the adoption of some type of computer adaptive state assessment. When we're looking at this, sometimes we have a kid that's at the 6th grade who's functioning at 3rd grade level. We're giving them a 6th grade exam, and what's the point in that? Are we there to help the kid, or are we there to give them a 6th grade exam that we know and they know they're going to fail? So how about let's meet kids where they are and then see if we can make them grow. We think that's very important. Encourage the state to develop a school grading system that's simple, clear to all, easily understood, and using multiple measures. Simple, probably not going to happen. Okay, been enough conversation. That's probably not going to happen by itself. Using multiple measures, I think ESSA gives us the flexibility and the opportunity to do that at this time. Clear to all, that's probably not going to happen either. Easily understood. Let's go back to multiple measures. Let's use that. Supporting policy. Schools should support policies regarding new ESSA law. Collaborate with ADE and ACE, the institution of higher ed, to remove barriers, eliminate bureaucracy. Policy recommendations, modify A through F grading scale, or eliminate A through F and figure out a different method to evaluate schools, but right now we're under A through F. We don't think one grade can determine the effectiveness of a kid or the effectiveness of a school. Support adequacy progress by making policy decisions based off of valid research and provide the necessary resources to implement. That's our policy for a recommendation for policymakers. Providing COLA. If we're not keeping up with the cost of living, then we're falling behind. If you look at some of our reports, we have fell behind dramatically the last couple of years. Increase the minimum teacher salary schedule at the same percentage as what's provided as a COLA, not some line item in the matrix. Otherwise, all you're doing is funding teacher salaries on the backs of school districts, especially when the foundation fund only accounts for about 57% of what schools are currently spending. Support new laws initiative with adequate funding to implement. Provide adequate funding for facility partnership program. Other policy recommendation, catastrophic special ed funds. I think the Adequacy Committee has come up with a recommendation on that here within the last month. Fund a high-cost transportation category. We have schools that have to spend more because if you don't get kids to school, if you don't transport them to school, then you're doomed from the start. But we're having schools spend significantly more than others on transportation costs, which in effect takes away money they could be spending on instructional materials for the classroom or teacher salaries in attracting and retaining quality teachers. So we think that's an issue that needs to be looked at. Study the impact of choice laws, including charter schools, on various areas, such as poverty, racial balance, student achievement, staffing, facilities, etc. There's a lot of talk out there about charters and fairness and equity, and I think Little Rock kind of brought all that to the forefront. We'd like to see policymakers conduct a true study on what is the impact of that. There's a lot of rhetoric on both sides. But let's have a study, a true independent study, and find out, are we really segregating schools? I don't know. There's some believe that we are, there's some that believe we're not, and some say that's okay if we do. But let's have a study and see what impact it's having. Let's have a study and see what impact it's having on communities and on districts who are having to take in students by school choice, but then they're also trying to pass a millage to increase their facilities. And if they're failing, who's actually paying for those facilities? It's the local taxpayers and not those that's school choice and then. All we're saying is, let's study it. It's probably too premature to determine policies around that, but if y'all have accurate, unbiased data, you make better decisions. Provide ADE with adequate resources to support struggling schools. We're concerned with ADE and the capacity to be able to carry the workload that's been placed upon them. We're very concerned about that. If the department takes over schools or the state board takes over schools and then they don't have the capacity to move those schools forward or help those schools out, what have we really done? And the answer is not much. So we're concerned with the loss of personnel at the department because, quite honestly, most personnel at the department, if they left and went to the school district, would make more money, as many of them have. So we think we have to probably change the salary schedule of the department, increase their personnel, and increase the capacity so they can actually help with schools and work with those schools who need it. You can thank me later for that, Commissioner Key. Provide adequate resources.
We'll see if I want to thank you or not.
Provide adequate resources, training, and
Depends on these two over here to see what kind of feedback I get.
One thing, and we've not gotten a lot of support on this, but there's been desegregation money. It's been going to school districts in the state that will eventually be phased out. Those money has been going towards schools and towards kids. We think it should continue going towards schools and kids. And I know everybody and their brother has their hand in the cookie jar on that. But that's been going for kids for many, many years. It needs to stay going towards kids, whether it's a partnership program, foundation fund, it needs to stay with kids. Pass no unfunded mandates. We preach on that all the time, and typically when the legislators start rolling their eyes at me. We would like to see it reinstated on the physical impact statement on education bills. Used to several years ago, right after Lakeview, there was 2 impact statements when a bill came through the committee. One was on the state budget, and then one with the impact on school districts. And over the years, we've lost the impact on school districts, and so we just have the impact on state budgets. And I'll give you an example, and that's the dyslexia law that was passed. We think it's very important, and it's helped a lot of kids out there. But the first impact statement that came out was around $11 million, and by the time it got through, because it just focused on the state budget, it was about $60,000. Don't hold me to those exact numbers, but that's kind of the ballpark where that went. When you ask districts what they're spending money on and how they're using their interventionists now and their instructional specialists now, many of them are doing it for dyslexia. And that's not bad. It's just an unfunded mandate that districts have to deal with and deal with it the best way they can. If legislators knew the impact on the school district budget, they would at least know up front whether or not they're passing along an unfunded mandate. Support ADE efforts to eliminate unnecessary and duplicate paperwork. We think there's some progress with that being made, and we think that's very, very important. And we'd also like to see legislative bills run through the education committees. Those are the committees that study education, are most knowledgeable about education, and we'd like to see that practice continue instead of running it through whichever committee they think they can get the bill through. Obviously, this group's not going to have any say in that, but it's our wish list. We can say what we want to. At the end of the day, we want a quality workforce, as I know you do. We want to give kids an opportunity to be successful in a career, whichever career they want, whether it's computer coding, 4-year college degree, doctorate degree, electrician, plumber. We want a kid with an opportunity and the skills to go whatever direction they want to go. We think that's our role as educators, and one that we're certainly willing to take on. We'd also like to see the business. You know, we keep hearing about bringing jobs to Arkansas. We think it would be a great idea if they had quality workers to take those jobs when they're brought to Arkansas. The only way they do that is through education. And so if education is not being funded, or if we're not doing our job, then business leaders will fail. And somehow there's a disconnect with that concept. Let me go over just a few things a little more specific about ESSA, because I know a lot of you, the accountability mechanism, and we've talked about multiple measures and what does that look like. And listening to her, we've read through the notes, so I don't want to rehash a lot of things. But there's a lot of conversation on growth. You know, that schools should be measured by growth on student achievement. And we think that is absolutely necessary. You know, if you're not moving students forward, then you're probably not doing what you need to be doing. However, we also think that there needs to be a safe haven for schools. If you have a high-performing school district, it is much harder to hit the growth factors when it comes to that level. So if you're a high-performing school district and you did not meet your growth factor for that particular year, you're still a high-performing school district, and you ought to be receiving an A or whatever the mechanism will be by the time we're done with ESSA. We think that's vital. I think it's been done in the past, but the way to discredit any accountability system you come up with, if you have a high-performing school district that receives a C or a D, and you have a low-performing school district who did a really good job growing their kids and they received an A, it's not going to take me 5 minutes to discredit the entire process out in the community. So there has to be two different ways to model schools and grade schools. We think other indicators of school and student success. Go back to industry certifications. Go back to graduation rates. Go back to multiple other areas. Student attendance. We would like to see a litany of things to choose from that they focus on, that local school has determined this is a need in our district, and we want to focus on this, and we're going to be held accountable for that. If it's improving chronic absenteeism problem, you think that would make that school more successful? Absolutely. Absolutely it would. So, but it might not fit their neighbor. So why not letting schools choose different things within a limited array? I understand you have to be able to compare test scores and stuff, but let's let the student choose. That's back when you go through our literacy evaluations, or holding all teachers accountable for literacy scores. And you go and have that conversation with your PE teacher that you're going to be evaluated on your literacy scores. Again, what does it do to the credibility of the system? If you have a litany of things for schools to choose on to what will meet their needs, and they're not afraid to be held accountable for it, let them pick that. Let them select it. I may want to know what my graduates are doing 1 year after graduation. Are they employed? Are they in the military? Are they in 4-year college? Is that a mark of a successful program, successful school? I think so. Some school may think so. They might want to choose that as one of their criteria to be evaluated on. So that is our goal as ESSA continues this conversation, is let's put out multiple things and let district choose within a limited range of what they think will become an effective school. I will go back one more time just for the safe haven of schools. You know, one of the things that I know you don't want to, but we don't want a gotcha program out there. I mean, I wouldn't think that's our goal. So if you're not developing a gotcha program, then let's offer safe haven for schools. Let's let school districts choose which one's going to be better for them. And that may vary from 1 year to 1 year. Is there anything wrong with that? If I continually select high performing and I'm not meeting my growth, eventually that's going to catch me. So I know one of the issues that you're going to have to come up with is an N factor. And there's multiple conversations around N factor, and I wish I had a good answer for you there. The only thing I can say is good luck with that. We've had those conversations, but Commissioner, I appreciate you allowing us to present our vision, and we'll be glad to support whatever this group can come up with.
All right, thank you, Dr. Abernathy. Appreciate the presentation. Open it up for questions if you hang on just for a second, see if there, and I know Dr. Abernathy covered their entire vision. If we could focus any questions you might have on the ESSA components and their thoughts there for the sake of time, and I think there'll be plenty of opportunities for discussion on these other areas as we move along. But for today, any questions for Dr. Abernathy on the AAEA vision regarding our direction under ESSA? Okay. All right. Thank you.
If you'd like, we'd go ahead and write the plan up and y'all just adopt it.
Well, we've been told that we already have the plan written. We keep
I know
hearing
better
that.
than that.
But, yeah.
Again, thank you, and Board and Commissioner.
All right. Thank you to your team. All right. Let's then move on to our next item on the agenda. Ms. Smith is going to come and present some feedback data. Last night was our final statewide ESSA tour listening session, and very well attended, close to 200 people in Springdale. And Ms. Bratton made the drive to Springdale for that. Appreciate her attendance. And we were in Ms. Hayward's backyard and brought a good contingent from Fayetteville, and it was a very robust discussion. We felt like it was very positive. But Tina has feedback, I think, collected from all 10, right?
Yes, I don't have actual numbers adding last night's to it, but none of these overarching answers have changed. So if we can look at the slide that I have first, as you guys know, we've asked 3 questions, and there we go. The first question that we've asked, the most important characteristics of your school. If you'll look at this, the one with the asterisk has been reported as an answer almost twice as many as the others. And for me personally, that was kind of a surprise, because I would have thought that the second one, effective teachers and leaders, might have been first. But these are the 3 items that are getting the most attention with this question. And last night, we got pretty much the same answers. And I don't have last night's counted yet, but I really, from looking quickly, it's not going to change. What I want you to be thinking about is I'm sharing these answers with you. And in the next little bit, too, is I want you to be thinking, what other questions does this bring to mind for you? And what do you want us to ask next based on the answers that we're getting? And soon we will have all of this data compiled for you with some overarching themes so that you can kind of see the patterns that are forming from all 10 of these listening forums. But for now, I'm just giving you what our most frequent responses are. The second question, the best measures of quality or success of your school. You can see these are very similar to what Dr. Abernathy just mentioned. Graduation rate was the most frequent response. Attendance rate is what people are writing, but we know what that really means. They're talking about chronic absenteeism at schools and student growth. That has been mentioned. And early on in these listening forums, student growth was the most common response, overwhelmingly, about for the first 5 or 6, and since that time it has shifted some, and graduation rate has more responses. But all 3 of these were pretty close in the number of responses that have been received on the best measures. And these measures, when we get to stage 2, we're really going to be focusing on in this accountability system that Dr. Abernathy referenced. It's these measures that we're going to need you to give us some feedback and recommendations on what you believe, based on what we have received from the stakeholders, is the best way to measure schools. The third question is, how do we make sure that every student in Arkansas has an opportunity for success? recruiting, retaining, and supporting effective teachers and leaders. And we all know that that is very important because a school cannot be effective without those two pieces happening. Having a student-focused system. We know that's part of the vision for us in the Department of Education. We want Arkansas to become a leader in student-focused education. And that really combines with personalized learning. If we're going to have student focus, the learning needs to be personalized. And I know that a lot of schools in Arkansas are already doing that. We have pockets of it at places in the state. We would just like to see it everywhere. So before I move to the survey data for this month's survey, what questions do you have on these responses at this point?
Sorry, Tina, just a clarification on the screen here. It says the first asterisk was effective teachers and leaders. Did that response change?
No, that means there were more responses
Okay.
to that one than any others.
Okay.
Yes, more responses. So there were I think I understand what you're asking. Important characteristics of your school, that was a response there. And it was also a response in making every student successful. So they gave that response, which allows us to see that even though it wasn't the most number of responses in that first question, people still view it as very important because they thought it was important for a characteristic of a successful school as well as a way to make sure that all students are successful. You have to have it in both areas, and that's why it looks different. Good question. Any other questions?
I have a quick question. When you're talking about the different characteristics, I know that when you did your surveys, there was no detail on what these things look like. Because one of the big questions that a lot of people ask, what does parent-community engagement look like in a school? Because parent engagement doesn't necessarily mean that a parent is at the school. So what does that look like?
And my answer at this point would be that will need to be defined by the individual districts. What is their goal for parental engagement involvement, and what should it look like for their district? So first, each location would need to come up with their own. Because of the different needs, at this point, I don't think we need to be telling schools this is exactly what it looks like. Maybe we'll have some parameters of what that looks like, but that each district has to define their own goals for effective parental and community engagement. Any other questions on this? And remember, when we move on to the next stage, we really need you to be thinking about these answers that we have and determining what the measures are going to be. And if, as you're driving down the road and you're thinking of this, I don't know about you, but I think about it all the time. Waking up, going to sleep. But if an idea pops to your head, write it down and share it with us and bring it up at these meetings, because I'm sure it will be a great one. Okay, so the survey this month is on excellent teachers and leaders, and we asked some very general questions about that. The first question was characteristics that you consider most important for your child or grandchild's teacher. Now, for purposes of today, what I did is I took all 9 of those responses, and I'm telling you what percentage of respondents believed that this was the most important characteristic for their child's teacher. Like, they ranked this one as number 1. So 35.5% of the time, people believed that a passion for teaching was the most important thing. It's interesting to see what people choose. I want you to notice that some things that we might think should be at the top, like job-related experience, was chosen only as number 1 only 2.4% of the time. I think what people really want is somebody who wants to be in the classroom and who loves children and loves teaching. That seems apparent to me from this answer. So the next question that we asked was basically the same question about administrators, building level principals, district level administrators. It's interesting, the switch. If you look at certification and licensure for the teachers, college degree, 10.5%, field experience, I would put with that 4.6. But when we look at the administrators, notice almost 30% of the people felt like that was the most important characteristic. And these were the same people answering the questions. So it's just very interesting to see what people believe is the most important thing for their children, grandchildren. Any questions on either of these? I will say we had the most respondents to this survey yet. And it will be up until the end of October, so Monday will be the last day for this survey. But we've had more than any other so far on this. The next question we ask is, does your child have access to these qualifications that you already ranked? And most of the people said yes. So the next question was, if you said no, why did you say no? What is the problem or your perceived problem? And in your information, I loaded all of the raw answers for you. You can see them all. But these were the most common responses that people had for the reasons why they felt like their children did not have quality educators. And these aren't my words. I took wording directly from people's responses. I should say that. Any questions on this? Again, be thinking about what we should ask based on these responses. Where should we go next? The next question was, what are some of the strategies that we can do to attract, support, retain effective educators? There were 24 pages of answers on this. You got it in your information. These were the most common responses. And again, it's the wording from the responses that we received. And we're getting a lot of these same answers we're getting them at the community listening forums that we've had. Any questions on this? Ms. Pfeffer is going to talk more in depth and in detail about what's going on for us with effective teachers and leaders. Now, the next items on the agenda, if it's okay, Commissioner, I'm just going to go right to the next couple of things. You guys submitted questions after the last steering committee meeting, and I got answers for some of those. So you got one document with some answers to your questions on it. You got a second document, the questions we're still waiting to answer. Now, we don't have a clear definition at this point. As you were reading through that and the answers to those questions, do you have things that we need to discuss today that maybe still aren't clear? Or that created another question for you?
As we get more questions, do you want us to just submit them in an email?
Yes. Yes, and what I think I will continue to do is, if you submit to me on a weekly basis, I will put back out to you guys what has been sent in, and you can, as we get the answers, I say a weekly basis, but I'm not the expert on all of these, so I will get the answers, and then I will send you the documents more frequently throughout the month, so as you have questions. And the same for those that we're still waiting to answer. As we develop answers to those, I will be getting those to you. Is there anything today, Ms. Newton, that's on your mind, or you want to just...
Well, my question is on NSIS, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, so we'll wait.
Well, we're not going to talk about that more today.
Okay. Well, I guess...
But we are going to talk about it more later.
Okay.
Of models and what that could look like. Okay. There was a lot of information in that answer on NSIS, a lot.
Yeah.
There's one particular chart that's kind of small, and it's on the left side of the page, and it lists the subpopulations, and then across the top of that chart, it tells if the N size is this number, this is what percentage of schools would have that subpopulation. As far as getting to the heart of the matter and the meat of how many schools will be affected, that particular chart is very clear on knowing how many schools will be affected. But if you have other detailed questions, yes, please email them to me.
Okay.
Any others? The last request that you had was for some terminology to be defined. So I gave you a link to the ADE acronym translator. It's almost comical that we need one of those on the website, but we do, and we add to it. So I gave you the link to that, and I also gave you a document that is being created, started when the vision planning process was started, and it will be updated as more information becomes available and more clarity becomes available, and I will do the same for that. And I have the same question. If any of those definitions really didn't clearly define it for you, or it was too much education speak, please ask again so I can get you a better answer on that terminology. Any questions on that? Okay, that's all.
All right, thank you, Tina. Next on the agenda, Ivy is going to come and talk about excellent teachers and leaders, which is a component of, we talk a lot about this accountability, but ESSA, the state plan, is a comprehensive plan, has much more to it than just accountability, and excellent teachers and leaders is one of those categories. So, Ivy?
Good morning. It's good to see all of you here. I think I've gotten to see a lot of you at our recent meetings, so we've appreciated that, and we've spent a lot of time lately starting to focus on all of these. And what I feel really good about in listening to Dr. Abernathy's presentation and looking at the survey that Ms. Smith just shared, so much of this conversation is really feeding into the work that we're doing within the Division of Licensure and Educator Effectiveness, and we're very aware of many of the things that are being brought forward, and it's good, though, to have the partners out there helping to get feedback and helping to communicate those things. So what I want to share with you today is just a little bit information. Let me go. Okay. On kind of where we are in terms of our focus on teacher and leader excellence, and what is that going to look like under ESSA, what changes are going to take place, what are some things we need to do. And I have three educators here today to talk to you, two from higher ed, one from a school district, and they're going to just briefly talk about what is this looking like in our preparation programs, what is this looking like in our school districts. So want to start here. As you know, the Vision for Excellence in Education is a student-focused system. And last month you heard about the quality learning standards, which are a piece for the future of education, and you heard about assessment systems. And so we've started those conversations there. I believe next month we'll focus more on the accountability system. And so today we're going to look at the excellent teachers and leaders part, where the excellence in teaching and leading, which I believe is absolutely the most important part as we transform to a student-focused education system. But as we do that, it's a challenge, and we know that there is a constant balance in play, and we're constantly balancing what we know to be so important about teacher and leader quality, having effective people who are passionate, who are committed, who are motivating to students, but also being allowing schools to have flexibility and being able to respond to immediate needs. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. So at the very heart, we know that every child deserves to be surrounded by a team of excellent educators every year. And if we want them to succeed, we have to support effective teachers and leaders. We have to help develop, and we have to promote this. And so our work really began a year ago when we started work on the Equitable Access to Excellent Educators Plan. I think this was almost a precursor to the Effective Teachers and Leaders part in ESSA. It started the conversation around focusing on our state's high poverty, high minority schools. Started the work at looking at what are the equity gaps. Do we have equity gaps in students' access to the most effective teachers and leaders? And as we've started this work, we're now able to make a transition into ESSA because a lot of that background work has already been done. So as we developed that plan, we engaged a lot of stakeholders. It was about a 6-month-long process in developing the plan that was submitted to the department in June of 2015. And the stakeholders developed these definitions for school leaders and school teachers. And as you look at those, you can see some common words in there. Strong ethics, unyielding commitments to students, looking at experience and preparation, those who are committed, able to collaborate, and what we wanted was to ensure that the expectations for effectiveness for teachers and leaders would be things that would be based on multiple measures, not just a single thing where you looked and said effective or not effective, but effectiveness, as we know, encompasses many, many things. Dr. Abernathy, a while ago, started talking about, we want something that's simple, we want something that's clear, and we want it based on multiple measures. And sometimes the simple is just not possible when you're talking about very complex things. But what we want to know is that we have things that are based on multiple measures, and we're able to look at them in a variety of ways. So as we've looked at data for schools and looking at do our students have equity and access to the most effective educators, we defined high poverty schools and low poverty schools by the percentage of school students receiving free or reduced lunches, and categorize them as those, high poverty schools would be those in the highest 25% of all schools ranked by free and reduced lunch, and then the low poverty would be the lowest quartile. And just to give you an idea, the differences between high poverty and low poverty, high minority, low minority, you can see the range of percentages and then what the median value is for each of those. So definitely differences, pretty wide gaps in looking at the demographics of students in high poverty versus low poverty schools and high minority versus low minority schools. And this chart here that you have, again, just going through the number of teachers, the number of students, and those percentages. And one of the things we want to do is continue to look at, so how statistically significant are these gaps? When we know there are gaps, let's look at the number of students who are being impacted. Let's look at the number of teachers that are being impacted. And so this will be continued ongoing work as we really study further meanings of the data. So if we look at where these schools are located, and I know that the map can be a little hard to see the colors, but every dot on there represents a high poverty school. And so we're not looking just at school districts, we're looking at schools, because within districts, a lot of times you'll have some schools that are high poverty, that do have large percentages of poverty students where some don't. And it's important that as we move forward, that districts are looking at that and looking to see, do we have differences even within our own district here? So you can see the poverty schools, which the 2015-16 school year data is very similar to the 14-15. High minority schools are depicted on this map. And then this map shows those that are both high poverty and high minority. And then the blue is showing, so the dots are schools, and the blue areas, shaded areas, are showing where districts that have implemented teacher cadet programs. And I'll talk a little bit about a teacher cadet program as one of our recruitment initiatives. But you can see if there is an area where you have a red dot, but we don't have blue shading, those are areas that we want to really look at, because the teacher cadet program, those are areas that are really working to grow their own in the future. And we're going to talk about why that's important, because here's what we know about educators and equity gaps in high poverty and high minority schools. We know that students, high poverty and high minority schools are more likely to have an inexperienced teacher than students in the low poverty, low minority schools. We know high poverty schools are more likely to have a teacher teaching out of their field of preparation. High poverty and high minority are more likely to have an unqualified teacher. So an unqualified teacher in our previous plan was defined as someone who was a long-term sub, so someone who did not have a license. And there is a greater rate of teacher attrition, greater rate of turnover at our high poverty and high minority schools. Not only between the high poverty and low poverty, but when you look at those schools and the state average. So ESSA changes and challenges. So there are a lot of opportunities with the flexibility that ESSA is going to provide, but there are also going to be some challenges, and we have to make sure that we're thinking about these things and we're having conversations so that we're moving down the right path. So one of the big things that ESSA has really done, it has pushed us beyond a focus just on a highly qualified teacher. Those of you who remember that term, highly qualified teacher, that was all about those inputs. What qualifications does a person have? But we didn't always go beyond that to look at how is that teacher impacting students. So ESSA has really prompted us to look not just at qualifications for a teacher, but as in our looking at our entire workforce. We are really looking at how are we attracting people to the profession. What are the pathways? What does our workforce data look like? As Dr. Abernathy mentioned and several of you have seen, we've had a significant decrease in the number of candidates in our first-time licensure programs for teacher preparation. What are we doing to elevate the profession? What are we doing to help people want to become a teacher? How are we preparing them? What are our educator preparation programs doing? Do they have the flexibility to be innovative? Do they have the flexibility to be creative and to meet individual needs? And that's one of the things we're going to let you hear about today with some of the new things educator preparation programs are doing. I can also tell you one of the things Dr. Abernathy mentioned about accountability for educator preparation. Just last week, the Title II Education Act, federal act was revised, and educator preparation programs will now have data reported, which we've actually been doing a lot of the data reporting, but they will now be rated according to certain criteria. So we will form even stronger partnerships with our educator preparation programs and facilitate strong partnerships between the programs and the school districts, because the candidates that leave their programs will be followed for 3 years, and data will be reported on those candidates, and those programs will be rated on how well those candidates do when they're in the school districts and how well those candidate students do. So there will be a lot of work to do there. And most importantly, once we have candidates in our schools, how are we developing, supporting them to retain them? So as we look here, we've done a lot of work on ensuring that there are multiple pathways to teaching and leading, but not only ensuring that there are those pathways, do people know about them? Do people know about them? So one of the things Dr. Abernathy mentioned was talking about incentives and loan forgiveness. And there are already some things in place that we're discovering people don't know about. So first of all, we want to make sure they're taking up advantages of the opportunities that exist, and then we want to continue to have conversations with the Department of Higher Ed to say, can those opportunities be expanded, and how do we ensure people know about those? We're going to be starting a campaign on Tuesday of next week, November 1st, in helping to bring back teachers to the profession. We're calling it the Teach Again campaign, and you'll be hearing about that starting next week. But just any way that we can work together, that we can ensure that people are getting the information. All of these other things here, I'm not going to go through each one because I could literally talk all day long about it, and I know, and I'll be happy to answer questions. But We have taken a very targeted approach with each of those things there, and I want to talk about the strong teacher leadership for just a moment. We know that it is so important for teachers to have opportunities to lead from the classroom. And while I do appreciate what Dr. Abernathy said about encouraging them to become really good administrators, I also want to say we need to do as good of a job of providing them the opportunities, if they're our very best, to stay in the classroom too, and incentivize that. So I think together we can work on that to have the best of both worlds. So some of the more immediate changes that I think we're going to see as we develop the ESSA plan and where we really need feedback. I showed you the definition a minute ago that had been collaboratively developed about an effective teacher and an effective leader. And over the last few years, we've really spent a lot of time really talking about teacher effectiveness, building administrator effectiveness, and promoting that. One of the first things I noticed with ESSA, though, is that the state will be required to define an ineffective teacher. And when I first saw that, I thought, we want to focus on effectiveness. And so then when you talk about ineffective, is this just the opposite of effective? And I know y'all think I sound crazy saying that, but I really think that it's not just a mere opposite. When you look at that definition of effective teacher and knowing that there are several different pieces of that, several different things that help make somebody effective. For example, experience and training help you become more effective, especially if you are growing each year as you're becoming experienced. We don't want to say that a teacher with no experience is ineffective, because they're not. They're new. They're learning. They're developing. So as we look at meeting this requirement under ESSA and creating that definition, we want to make sure that that definition is not something that's going to disadvantage or make someone not want to become an educator. So we need to make sure that as we look at our policies that we are allowing for those growth years, especially during those first 3 years of teaching, as someone is being supported and developed to become effective. Another definition we want to look at, we have under the Equitable Access Plan defined an inexperienced teacher as a novice teacher, a first-year teacher. Under those new Title II regs for higher ed, they're defining a novice teacher as one with 3 years of experience. Therefore, those teachers are going to be followed as they leave their preparation programs for 3 years. And in Arkansas, under the Teacher Fair Dismissal Act, you're a probationary teacher for your first 3 years of employment. So in our ESSA plan, we do need to get feedback and talk about whether or not an inexperienced teacher might be someone for 3 years. And within that time, as you're inexperienced, maybe you're growing and developing and emerging into an effective. Because what we want to do is promote the profession and promote that idea of we're going to support and develop you so that you are as effective as you can possibly be. The next criteria there where I have student highlighted, under the Equitable Access Plan work, we really focused on school level data. We looked at the differences between those high poverty, high minority schools, low poverty, low minority schools. Under ESSA, we're going to have to go deeper down to the student level. And so that's going to even be different. In our state's Title I schools, data will be reported out not just if you're a high poverty school, but it's going to be looking at the poverty students within your school as compared to the non-poverty students within your school. So we'll be looking at almost all schools in the state, as most of our schools are Title I schools. So there's going to be some different, there's going to be a deeper look into every student and how is every student being impacted by having effective teachers. So these are a couple of things that, in terms of accountability, that are changing for us. So under ESSA, we have to ensure that our low-income and minority children, no matter if they're in a high poverty or high minority school or not, we're going to have to look at whether or not these students are served at disproportionate rates by ineffective, out-of-field, or inexperienced teachers. And the way that'll be done is we will have calculations of disproportionality. And that is, I can actually spell that word now without spell check on the computer. Now, do we have that calculation of disproportionality completely figured out yet? Not completely. That's part of what we're looking at in terms of the accountability plan. But it will be at the student level. So we'll be looking within schools and looking at, are there differences within schools in terms of, do certain students have more access to more effective teachers? So it's going to be a rich conversation between the department and between schools. And these are conversations that we know you all can help us with.
So, Ivy, if you stop there just for a second,
Yes,
so
sir.
make sure, just for clarification, in that conversation about within schools, you have 2 English classes. One English class has a highly effective teacher, one may not. And are students disproportionately served by the effective versus the ineffective? And,
Yes.
and we're going to have to drill down. I mean, I wanted to pause there because that's quite a bit different than anything we've done.
Yes.
And that's going to be difficult conversations, I think, at the school level.
It
So
is.
I just wanted to make sure that this group's all aware of how important that is and how much help we're going to need in facilitating, fostering positive conversations about that. Just because they're difficult conversations don't mean they'll be, they can't be positive conversations.
It is, and not only for ineffective, it will be for the inexperienced, it will be for teachers teaching either out of field or unlicensed. And again, it's about looking at the data and having a plan to address it if disproportionalities exist. So it all goes back to developing those data systems, having that information, and then how are we addressing that? And one of the things that we know is that it's going to be important for us to look at what resources are out there, financial resources, human resources, other types of things that we can help schools look at a lot of different things. If it is determined that there are some places that continuously have higher rates of teachers who are not teaching in their field of expertise, or teachers who continuously are experienced, because we know that while a lot of value can be added by new teachers coming into a school, if teachers do not remain there and that culture does not get built to where you have sustainability of initiatives and knowledge and skills, that can be problematic. I think in the country, between $2 and $4 billion are spent every year on issues related to teacher turnover. So when you think about that amount of money, the new training that has to take place, the policies that have to be developed, the professional growth opportunities that have to occur, it is high rates of turnover definitely have a negative impact. So in defining an ineffective teacher, again, I want us to be very aware of challenges, considerations, and concerns. And in doing so, I think we want to look at these options and really weigh through pros and cons of each approach. We currently have a system that focuses on teacher effectiveness. The data that we received from the 2015-16 school year indicate that about 85% of our teachers were rated at proficient, about 10% distinguished, and about 7%, I may have my math wrong there. The vast majority of our teachers were rated proficient or distinguished, and about, I think, 6 to 7% were rated at a basic level or lower. So when you look at that 2015-16 data, you look at the work that was done in the schools and the performance ratings of those teachers, by and large, our teachers are performing at proficient or higher levels, which is a good thing in our schools. What we want to continue to do is build the capacity of our leaders to ensure that they understand what effective teaching looks like and how to support and how to help teachers grow, and ensuring that those conversations are taking place so that teachers are getting that personalized professional development that's focused on their needs. But in doing so, we have opportunities also to retool our current systems, and that may be something we want to take into consideration. States could look at developing or using a different measure. States could look at leaving it up to local discretion in determining someone who's ineffective, or take another approach. So obviously there are pros and cons to each of these, and we've had discussion with some smaller groups, getting feedback on each of those. So I would love to have some feedback from this group as well. And in terms of reporting, our school report cards will be more detailed so that the public will have greater access to information regarding the professional qualifications of teachers, looking at the number and percentage of those who are inexperienced, teaching with emergency or provisional license, or not teaching in the licensure field where they, or the area where they are licensed. So lots of new data, lots of new information will be reported. So before I go on the next part, where we're going to talk a little bit about the Title II-A funding, which is the federal money that is really targeted towards developing and retaining teachers, I would like to give our three educators who are here a chance to talk about teacher and leader quality and effectiveness from their viewpoints. We have Dr. Zaidi here from SAU. He's going to talk about the challenges right now that higher ed preparation programs are facing. Then we have Dr. Janet Penner-Williams, who is here from the U of A. She's going to talk a little bit about a program that they've developed to address a specific need within their geographic area. And then we have Novella Humphrey here from Southside School District, and she's going to talk about the future and how they're taking charge of ensuring that their school has access to these. And then we'll come back. But if we have, or I can stop for questions.
I think Mr. Bennett may have a question.
I had a quick question about defining effective teachers. Would that be done on a teacher-by-teacher basis? And if so, would it just determine a teacher's effectiveness in each course they teach, or would it be overall?
Did you say defining effective?
Well, determining their effectiveness.
Determining their effectiveness. Right now, a teacher is evaluated on the totality of their performance. And if we look at that during a summative evaluation year, where they're evaluated on their professionalism, their classroom management, their teaching, and their planning and preparation skills, it would be more of a holistic look, because within tests there are several different elements that go into play there. If you look at each individual course that a teacher teaches, that would be different from what our current system has right now. So,
do you think it would be best if we looked at each course? Because I had teachers that were pretty good at teaching probably U.S. history, but not that good at world history. So do you think it would be best to look at each course they taught?
I think the best approach would be to look at where and have conversations about what makes a teacher more effective in one course or one area they're teaching than in another. And so is it a lack of the foundational knowledge that they need, and how do we help them improve? I think we have to be very careful in saying, well, you're good here and that's okay, and because if you're not so good in another area, how is that impacting those students that are in there? So I think the conversation would always need to be about, how do we help you get better no matter what it is that you're assigned to teach?
Okay, thank you.
I had a quick question also. When you're talking about the ineffective teachers, what does ESSA require as far as reporting? Is that still going to be something that's going to be between the teacher and the principal as far as, sitting down and discussing their PGP and seeing where they fall, in the different tiers? Or is that going to be something that's reported? Because I can see a teacher being, again, I kind of think about the labels that we got into with academic distress, labeled as ineffective, and they just throw up their hands and say, well, I'm going to quit. I'm not going to try to get any better.
So, and I'm glad you brought this up because I should have probably made it clear. Under No Child Left Behind and to receive ESEA flexibility, states were required by the federal government to establish teacher and leader evaluation systems that included student growth as a significant criterion in the evaluation rating. So what ESSA did is ESSA says, states, we're going to allow you to define your teacher and leader effectiveness or your teacher and leader quality. So ESSA now puts it back in our hands to say, what do you want it to look like? And so we have the flexibility to say, well, within our system, in order for us to promote teacher effectiveness and define an effective teacher, we get to look at what those measures are, and we get to take all of the things. So it's really not an ESSA requirement. That's really in our hands.
So I guess the privacy part is what my question is.
Yes. So in the in reporting of an ineffective teacher, that is going to be, that's part of the challenge that we have, because if we're having to report out at a school level, if students are being taught by ineffective teachers, how does that happen in a way so that teacher privacy is protected, so that the employment information is not subject to things that would create a problem? Okay. Yes, that's one of the challenges we're going to have.
I have one question for those of us that aren't administrators. For us to understand the things that the teachers are looked at for or rated on, is the Test and Leads Handbook the best place for us to look for that information?
That is a very good start.
Okay.
There are also that would be the best place to start. Our website, we have different resources and information posted there, some training presentations that I think have been updated recently with that. School districts also, we have surveys for districts to complete and to send in to us to help us know what are your needs. Do you have needs for us to come in and do some specialized trainings on the framework itself? Do you have needs for us to come in and talk about the process that's going on? Are you struggling within your school because one principal at one school is requiring something that is much more time consuming that in another school? So those are several things, but I do have Sandra Hurst in the room, and so when we have a break or time like that, definitely can have her go through some of the more specific things.
Ms. Gill, I may be reading more into the question, but tell me if I am. But are you also asking if there is a common language description of some of these things that are not necessarily in educator language that could help parents understand what administrators are looking for in teachers and in the teaching? Because I don't know that we have that. I mean, it's if we look at all the test documents, it's probably very education
well, they would
focused.
all be very educator related, yes.
Yeah.
So
that's not what I was, when we were looking at defining what an ineffective teacher is, not being an administrator, I need to know what the values are that they're looked at. So that's what I was asking, is to see what they were evaluated as so that I could see what would be an ineffective teacher.
Okay.
Well, and again, an ineffective teacher, if we define, if there's a definition that would take into, that would look at a more total picture rather than one thing. And I think that kind of speaks to what we've heard in terms of school and district accountability. Let's not use one test score to define everything. So I think, again, when you look at our definitions of effective teacher and effective leader, we're not using one thing to define that totality. And so I think we would need to be very careful that we would not do the same thing with ineffective. Okay?
Ms. Phillips, did you have a comment on that?
Yes,
Okay.
on the Department of Ed's website, you will find that the 4 areas and the 22
Okay.
components.
All right, thank you.
But Commissioner Key, your point about helping to make sure that public and parents would understand what that is, I think that's probably an area that we could address that. So what does this mean? You know, because as an educator, it might make sense to you, but maybe not so much as a parent. Yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions? And is Bobby next? Or-
I was gonna let
Oh,
our
you're letting your
educators
teachers-
talk
yes, I'm
just a
sorry.
minute, and
Yep,
then we'll
getting
come
ahead of
in. And
myself.
I think Mr. Lester be okay with that. Okay, thank you. Yes. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Just talk.
Okay.
Sit out of the way.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Zaidi Mohzain. I'm the Dean in the College of Education at Southern Arkansas University. Glad to be here and glad to participate in this. I'm going to present to you from a perspective of a Dean of EPP, Educator Preparation Programs. What are the issues that we are facing? Well, the data is not in our favor, in the College of Education favor, across the country and in Arkansas. In Arkansas, since 2009, 2015, there are 59% dropped in the head counts of students enrolled in any licensure programs combined. 60%, almost 60% drop. So in terms of prudent business practice or organizational practice, why would we want to put resources into a declining programs with no and fewer students, head counts, because there's a need to reallocate resources in the program that is having more head counts. A good example is in Southern Arkansas, we have a tremendous growth. You read in the papers that our enrollment has been increasing every year. we are very good at that. But not in education. In all other areas, yes. So what happened? I might lose my faculty and it's be taken over by the programs that have increased enrollment. What can I do? I cannot force people to come and want to be a teacher. So that's the dilemma that I am facing as a preparer, as a trainer of teachers. Because I cannot afford to have one full-time faculty having only 2 or 3 students in the program. That is not the way how things are done. That's another issue. Another issue is somebody mentioned about mandates, regulation, and that kind of stuff. A key point here is this. ESSA in a way is good because it provides us more room to be flexible, to be creative, which is the idea itself is very appetizing, it's very encouraging, it's very empowering. But on the other hand, there are also regulation that impedes, because for every mandate, for every requirement, we have to have somebody doing it. So really, we hire professors to teach maybe 60% or 50% teaching, and the balance is administrative, do the paperwork. And that's what happened in special education. We train them to teach classroom teaching, that they end up doing a lot of paperwork. And look what happened. They quit special education teachers. So the same dynamic, the same happenstance is keep on recurring at different level. So what can we do about lessening the regulation? For example, this is a good example, I think. We are supposed to track our graduate who have completed our degree program up to 3 years while they are working in the schools, in the public school. They are no longer obligated to us. So if they quit teaching because the pay is low and they want to go and work at JCPenney, maybe I'm outdated, no more JCPenney these days. Maybe they want to quit teaching after 1 year or 2 years, and then they want to go and work at Walmart as a manager and get more money, because teachers nowadays cannot even afford to buy a house, because the median income in the United States is $58,000 for teachers across the country. So you cannot build a family and you cannot buy a house. So they quit teaching. The statistic says we lose teacher about 8% a year across the country. So if they quit teaching, I get dinged. My university get dinged. But I have no control about how is my graduate going to support themselves, how are they going to earn a living, that kind of stuff, and yet my program will be scrutinized. And my program accreditation and my program ability to continuing on will be jeopardized, because that is a factor against me. So in a roundabout way, the system that's supposedly enable, empowering, and supportive of me is killing me. Does it make sense? Yeah. So we talk about viability. We are public university, and the public university have their own mission, but also has the viability requirement. We have to graduate, we have to have a minimum number of completers in the 3-year average in order for the state to continue funding that program. Granted that funding from the state right now is stand at 27% of our revenue come from the state. But still, nevertheless, if we do not meet that viability standard, then the program will not be funded. That the legislative mandates. That's the bad, negative, sad story from the dean's perspective. The good thing about, exciting thing from a dean's perspective is we are going into a new phase of educating, and we can no longer be operating in the traditional mode of operating, only silos. We cannot say this is K-12 and this is post-secondary and that kind of stuff. So you belong here, you belong here. Education have to be more inclusive and have to begin from pre-K all the way to 20. Have to be seamless. It's granted that I heard today that not everybody who graduate from high school are going to college, but university have a role to play. There's a lot of, we talk about collaboration, but if you really define and you say exactly how do you collaborate with area school, it's very, very, I'll be interested to hear the behavioral sequence or indicators of what collaboration means between the university and area school. There's a vast room of improvement to be there, because we say we collaborate, but we really don't. And that's my piece. I'm glad to answer your questions, if you have any.
Any questions? All right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Tina, just a note, I just got a text from Mr. Williamson, the live feed just quit. Okay.
Okay, I'm Janet Penner Williams, and I'm the Interim Associate Dean for Education at U of A Fayetteville. And I'm really happy to be here because I'm talking about something that's very close to my heart and it brings me a lot of joy. My husband said last night, "What are you doing late tonight again?" I said, "Well, I'm going to teach a class that we call Maestro, which is Spanish for teacher." And I noticed that Tina put up that we have the parents and the people that talk in your town meetings are asking about parent and community engagement. And this is one way that we think by growing our own bilingual, bicultural teachers, we're going to have them in the community. So, as you know, or maybe not, but we just set a slide showing the high poverty and the high minority schools. In Northwest Arkansas, Springdale has the largest number of English learners in the state. Rogers is number 2, Fort Smith is number 3, and Springdale has become a majority minority district. And so we need bilingual, bicultural students. If you talk to, or teachers, we already have the students. If you talk to Dr. Rollins in Springdale, he's always telling us, "Get me some bilingual teachers, please." So Diana Gonzalez-Worthen and I are working together to try to do that. And we have a pilot program. It's very small now because we haven't been awarded some of the grants that we've applied for, but we're not giving up. And we're targeting the Northwest Arkansas bilingual, bicultural instructional assistants. You can talk to people nationwide and they'll say growing your own is the best way to go. These paraprofessionals have roots in the community, they're connected. That's why they see their parents at church, at the grocery store, as they're walking down the street. And because they speak their language, because they look like them, they have a background similar to them, they're very open. The parents will talk to them when they might not go to the school and talk to the teacher in the classroom. Some of them haven't had the best classroom experiences in their past when they were students. So we've coordinated with NWAC, the community college in Northwest Arkansas, and a lot of our paraprofessionals got their first 60 hours there. It's taking us 3 years to finish the program at U of A because they can't quit their jobs. These are the sole breadwinners, and we have had very good cooperation from our childhood education department to schedule some classes at 4 o'clock. Our Springdale schools have allowed the paraprofessionals to leave school a little bit early so they can get to campus, and they have gotten grants, they've gotten loans. We've provided a little bit of support from some funds that I have access to. And mostly we've done advising and mentoring for them. ADE has been a great partner with us. They've allowed them to count. These paraprofessionals are working with students. That was a requirement to get into the program. They were recommended by their principal. They were recommended by the teachers that they've worked with, that they saw the potential that, in fact, Mrs. Hutton just told me yesterday, "I can't wait until Raciel is a teacher. We want they call him Mr. O. We want Mr. O to be a teacher." And so ADE says when they're working with these students in small groups, and they are supervised still, they have an instructional facilitator that supervises them, that's part of their internship hours. In addition to that, we've provided substitute money so that they're out 6 weeks in a full classroom where they become taking charge, and we get to listen to their stories about how I knew these students in small group, but it's different. Those of you that have taught or have worked with large groups of students know it's a little different ball game, but their classroom management I would put against any novice teacher. They're also going to get their ESL endorsement, and when they complete, they've committed to work in that district for 3 years. And the principals have all said, if I have an opening, I will hire this person. And because we are fortunate in Northwest Arkansas to have a growing student population, Springdale usually has some teacher vacancies to fill. So advantages, I've talked a little bit, that they do have the commitment. We're not going to train them and have them leave for Texas because Texas gives you a signing bonus if you're bilingual. They've got their mothers there, their children there. The principals have already endorsed them because not every paraprofessional has what it takes to become a teacher, but a lot of them sure do. And they have that passion, too, that we were talking about earlier. And we have the commitment for them to be hired. I couldn't have asked for better support from ADE. Stacy's worked with me. I'm saying Joan, and I said Stacy, but I didn't mean that. I meant Dr. Ivy has worked with me on this. But I know I could reach out to Stacy too if I needed to. Actually, Stacy works with me on an ESL endorsement program that we have going in our area too. So I feel like I'm very blessed that the university has partnered our district. Springdale was totally on board. We're looking to Rogers to add some in the future, and probably Fort Smith. And Joan is my go-to person when I have licensure questions, or can we, do this, that, and then she says, well, let me check. And this is a picture of the 3 of them that are going to be graduating in May. And they've all done solo teaching lessons that we've observed, and this was their class after school. They're in the Elmdale cafeteria that has these gorgeous windows. And Diana Gonzalez-Worthen and my contact information. Are there any questions? It does my heart good.
Thank you, Dr. Penner-Williams. Questions? Yeah, Ms. Bratton.
What a wonderful program that is. That's great to hear. I have just a quick question, I wanted to clarify all of it in my mind. But and so these students that are chosen or that are kind of watched by principals and things from the school district are then they go through NWAC to have their 60 hours for paraprofessional.
Most of them did not have 60 hours as a paraprofessional. They passed the test. Okay. But most of them do their first 60 hours because we do have a 2+2 agreement with NWAC on our elementary. It's cheaper for them, and they have a Springdale campus at NWAC, and they offer every course that we require for the first 60 hours, and we have an agreement that we take the transfer credit.
Okay.
So
that's where I got kind of a little bit lost.
Okay.
And then they're able to sit through their ESL endorsement and work in the district during that time?
Yes.
Wow, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So they get to keep their jobs while they're getting their degree, and that's what it's all about.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. My name is Novella Humphrey. I serve 1,900 students in the Southside School District. We start at age 6 weeks, and we go into their future story. Our vision is that pre-K to jobs initiative that's been spoken about so much. And today I really want to talk to you about growing your own. My number one responsibility in this district is the hiring of great teachers. Without a great teacher, so many things cannot happen in the classroom that students need. And those future stories will never come true without the support of good teachers for our students. So as we talk about growing your own, I also have to define for you a little bit about our district. We have an early childhood learning center. We serve 192 students as of today. If we could build 2 classrooms and find 2 certified teachers, we could fill 2 classrooms on Monday morning. There's a waiting list for that pre-K program that we are not able to meet at this time, just the high demand. And as an administrator, we've dealt with the same teacher shortage in math and science and Spanish and special education for years. But in the last 2 years, as the decline Dr. Zadie talked about in teacher enrollment programs, we also are facing that same shortage in pre-K, elementary, and mid-level teachers. And so it's become imperative that we grow our own teachers. But first and foremost, I'm a teacher. Secondly, I'm a professional development specialist trained by Ms. Kaufman. And my class is set a long time today, so you're going to have to get active through my presentation. You need pencil, paper, and a calculator if you have it on your smartphone, and most of the audience does, because yours would have been taken away in my classroom. So the first thing I need you to write down, there are 3 requirements to grow your own teacher in Independence County. And the other thing I need to tell you is last week we were named a Forward Arkansas Community, our entire county, all 4 public school districts.
And as part of our impact independence is growing our own teachers, improving teacher quality in Independence County. To qualify for some financial assistance to be a teacher in Arkansas, you need to meet 3 qualifications. Number 1, you need to have a 21 or higher on the ACT. Number 2, you need to come to school 95% of the time. 95% of the time. And then the third thing, you need no grade below a C on your high school transcript. So these qualifications allow many students to be part of that. If I made a poor choice in my freshman year, I still have opportunities to meet the 21 and the 95% and salvage my GPA. But with those 3 qualifications, I received 3 opportunities. The first is a 30-hour scholarship to UACCB, the local community college in Batesville. The second is an Arkansas Scholar, which is available to every student in Independence County. And I receive free textbooks. Non-consumable textbooks are free for me if I attend UACCB. So now I have 30 hours paid for 2 years, and I have free textbooks. I also qualify for the Arkansas Academic Challenge or the lottery scholarship with those qualifications. So my first 2 years in a teacher education program can cost me nothing. And one of the things as a mother of a student in a teacher education program is I know I cannot allow him to leave school with a student loan debt that exceeds his ability to earn as a first-year teacher. And so that's became also my goal with our students in Independence County who are growing our own. We do utilize the Teacher Cadet Program, the Certified Teaching Assistant Program, to try to recruit students into this 2-year program. They can go to UACCB, finish their associate's degree. Currently, I have a Teacher Cadet student who will graduate from high school with 37 hours of concurrent credit to UACCB. She already has cut her time to degree by a year. So in 3 years, she could be in the classroom. She wants to be a preschool teacher. For the last 2 school years, she's been working part-time in our preschool. And we will continue to work with her around her college schedule to keep her employed and gaining that valuable classroom experience while she finishes her degree. But we just have 2 years down. We have to get a 4-year program. There are 6 programs within a 75-mile radius of our school, but many of our students are limited by transportation to have access to one of those programs. So next Friday, we will host a meeting to bring UACCB, Lyon College, the 2 teacher cadet programs in our county, and the other conversion charter high school in our county together to talk about building a solid pathway to being a teacher in Independence County. Because if you have your smartphone out, what I need you to know, to be a secondary teacher, I had those first 2 years paid for at UACCB. Now I need to transfer to Lyon College because it's the only secondary prep program in our area. In your calculator, would you put the number $48,000? That's the tuition for the next 2 years. But because I'm a UACCB graduate, I qualify for a transfer scholarship that reduces that in half. So what number do you have now? $24,000. I still have the Academic Challenge Scholarship, the last 2 years remaining of it, so take $9,000 off that. That's the cost to become a 4-year teacher in Independence County. But if we could adapt Dr. Abernathy's suggestion and double that last 2 years, take $9,000 off that amount. Now it's $6,000. $6,000 to be a teacher. That's an affordable 4-year education. By meeting what 3 requirements? No grade below a C, having a 21 on the ACT, and coming to school 95% of the time. And I agree with Dr. Abernathy, if we need to raise the threshold on the GPA for that junior and senior year, we want to do that because I want high quality secondary teachers that know their content well. So part of growing your own is we have to find the mechanisms to help students fund that. If we do not double the lottery scholarship, one thing is the ADHE STEP grants. They repay $3,000 for the first 3 years of teaching in a high shortage area. If I'm a secondary math or science teacher, I could have $9,000 of that $15,000 forgiven. That's a doable debt load for a teacher. So our goal as we grow our own is also to make sure we make it very affordable to become a teacher. And one of those, this solid pathway has to be built because with our conversion charter, we're really getting good at producing welders. We have a manufacturer who says, I'll hire everyone you can produce. We're working hard to address the nursing shortage, but we have to work even harder to address the teacher shortage in our county. And so we're doing that through Teacher Cadet Program. We're doing that through the Certified Teaching Assistant Program. And then the other things that we collectively as educators have to do is we have to share our profession. When I go into our teacher cadet class, I get excited. I get excited because I know those students. I know their future story. I know what they want to do. I've seen the amazing things they've done as K through 12 students, and it makes me very excited. I have to champion our profession. I have to make it something that they desire to be. We have to help them to want this, to be passionate about it, because the number one thing on the survey Tina shared, was they want a teacher who's passionate, who loves and wants to be in the classroom. And so that becomes part of our goal, is also to share our profession with our students. And then we have to share those pathways to the profession. As I said, we have 6 teacher education prep programs within 75-mile radius of our school, but we're still struggling to fill positions with quality teachers. So we have to know not only those pathways, but the other pathways. What about an MAT program? What about the Apple program? Just this week, a gentleman came into our office to meet with our superintendent to say, how do I become a certified teacher? Last month, it was a young woman came in. She said, I have a psychology degree. I really think I want to teach. How do I become a teacher? We are the immediate resource in the community. They're not intimidated to walk in the door of the administration building where their child is enrolled in school, or to walk into the principal's office. So we have to know those pathways. We have to be able to communicate them to our students, to our families, and to our community so that they're prepared to do that. And then we have to collaborate with teacher prep programs. I told you we could open 2 classrooms on Monday. We have the students and families ready to come, but we need a classroom. But most importantly, we need a teacher. And this summer, as the first day of school approached and the countdown was on, we were still 1 teacher short. 1 teacher short at preschool, 1 teacher short at preschool. We'd filled all elementary positions. It had been almost a 2-month process. But we felt really great about the staff we'd been able to hire. But we were still struggling for 1 preschool position. And throughout every conversation in our administrative meeting, we would say, if only she didn't have to intern. If only she graduated now. And the she we're talking about is a prayer professional named Ashley. Ashley's been employed in our district for 5 years. She started to work in our district. She completed her CDA to work in our preschool. She continued to her associates, and now the only thing lacking was her internship experience. She spent 5 years working in our district, but the only way she could complete her degree was to quit her job and go to another district and intern to get classroom experience. The same thing we'd been giving Ashley every day around the school year, because preschool's open 12 months a year. So she's been working around all 12 months for 5 years, but she needs additional experience. And so through conversations with her university, with conversation with Ivy's office, we were able to work out a solution, because she was the best candidate. She was the best fit for the classroom. She had experience, a preschool classroom, and we were able to come up with a solution that allowed her to intern with us and stay with us. And that's the collaboration we have to provide with teacher education programs. We talked about test training. Dr. Abernathy mentioned the varying levels students come out of teacher prep programs with. We have principals who are experts in tests. We have administrators trained by Sanders' office. We can provide that training. We have to work together. We can meet that need in that teacher prep program. They can help us to fill those positions. I love to go in and be a guest teacher for a day or 2 in a teacher prep, because I'm recruiting the whole time I'm in there. So we love those opportunities. So we have to find that way to collaborate. The teacher cadet student I've talked about, by the time she finishes, she will have worked for us 6 years. 6 years by the time she finishes her degree. What does her internship need to look like? Does it need to look like what teacher internship looked like 20 years ago when I graduated? Does teacher internship need to change as we go into the shortage area and we grow our own? What kind of experiences along the way, though, do we need to be very intentional about providing her so she is prepared for the classroom? What opportunities does she need to have so that she's at no disadvantage on the first day of school as a teacher? And so those are conversations we have to have back and forth between teacher prep programs. I'm very proud to say the 2+2 agreement arranged in our county does meet after school hours. so our paraprofessionals can attend those classes from 4 to 8:30 in the evening to pursue that bachelor's degree. And that's the type of flexibility, that's the type of collaboration that we have to continue, that we have to model in order to grow our own.
All right, thank you for that presentation. Very nice. Questions? Okay.
Okay. Aren't you excited getting to hear that? And we wanted to share that with you because in the midst of the challenges and the things that we know are really going to cause us to have to dig in and work hard, there are so many good things going on, and we've got to focus on that, and we've got to bring these ideas to the table. But these are examples of what I think ESSA is going to promote and what we want to work toward. So, and Commissioner Key, I think you've done a really good job bringing us together as a team. Obviously, nobody even knows the difference between Stacy and Tina and I. You know, they're just, you know, whoever they call, we're going to help. Tina and I dressed alike today, so can't get much more of a team than that. But I'm going to go ahead and get us to the last two slides where we're going to, Bobby Lester is going to talk a little bit about Title IIA funding. And I think you have the slides. We really have the opportunity now to work with districts to examine the Title IIA allotments, the expenditures, the way that those funds are being used to address how we ensure we have effective teachers and leaders in our schools. So I'm going to let him talk through that funding stream and the changes that will come under ESSA for that. We lost that. They have a copy, so you may just
Okay. All right. Good morning. I guess it's still morning. I've been teased in the past about my looks breaking a camera, but when I was mentioned a while ago, live stream shut down, so I don't know how I need to feel about that. But anyway, the last time I was with you, we provided you with a list of funding programs that we were given. Of those funding programs that I shared with you, I shared with you that each one of those programs was tied to a list of rules and regulations that the feds put down for the expenditure of those funds. That is continued to be in the process of the federal government is still looking at those and developing those. They have not been passed yet. But in the meantime, as they receive feedback from states, they issue to the states non-regulatory guidance. Non-regulatory guidance, to make it simple to me, is basically here's some guidance on some options that you can do so you can start preparing. They're not tied or binding by legal law. And we have received one. The one I want to talk about today is the Title II funding that goes along with the development of teacher and principal effectiveness. If you look on the sheet that I provided you, it shows on the left there that the state receives a total allocation from the federal government. This past year is estimated around $22 million, okay? When it comes to the state, we are required to reserve or set aside percentages for the districts that money will go to and to the state. The state being the SEA. When you see the term SEA, that's the state educational agency, and the LEA, which is the local education agency, okay? Currently, and this is what we do, and it's still an option, is that 95% of that funding that comes to our state goes to the districts, and 5% is set aside for state activities. And you heard a lot of those examples with Ms. Pfeffer's talk earlier, and that is what we currently do. Some of that percentage goes to professional development, teacher effectiveness, percentage of that, small percentage that goes to administrative cost, and something that I think you should know too is that a small percentage that goes to non-public schools for their professional development. Okay, that's all set aside. Okay. In the meetings that I've gone to, each state is always had issues that we bring up and about, what's going on in our states. One of them being that the teacher preparedness and the teacher effectiveness is one of those. So I think that the federal government listened to that, and they've given a couple more, one option apiece, a new option for the set aside for the LEAs and a set aside for the SEA. And if you look there, the new one is the 95% can stay into effect, or the new option is that the SEA, the state, may reserve up to 3% of the amount of that 95% for state-level principal and school leadership support, including preparation academies. Okay? And the remainder of that percentage would go to LEA subgrants. The LEA subgrants are, at this time, that go to districts. They must do an application with a plan of how they're going to use that money. We look at that for allowability, and then that money is issued to them. Okay? The remainder goes to the LEA subgrants. Down at the bottom, you'll see that the 5% that we reserve, and it is still an option, is that the new added option is the SEA may reserve up to 2% of the total state funding for teacher, principal, or other school leader preparation academies. So what it's saying is you can designate that now. In your 5% that you got, you can designate 2% of that to go to preparation academies. 1% to administrative cost, and the remainder to other state activities, and many of those you heard from Ms. Pfeffer that she spoke earlier. And those are the two options that they have now provided for us. Again, they are options, and the one that we currently do with the 95% going to the LEA subgrants and the 5% for state activities could continue to be in place.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Lester?
Are you going to give the districts, when they do their applications, are you going to give them any kind of guidelines on how that would be appropriate ways to use that funding? Or is it going to be totally up to the districts?
Many of it is up to the districts, but there are allowable expenses that the feds put down that you can spend that money on. That's a good question. Some of them now we use for, the districts themselves can use for recruitment and retention. For those areas where they're struggling to find that teacher in those core areas, if they can't find them, they can give bonus or stipends to bring those teachers in. It's up to the local district to, if it's an allowable expense.
So a bonus or a stipend for a high need area would be allowable?
Yes, ma'am. PD, professional development, local professional development, they can spend that money on that. Instructional facilitators in their district that can be, put into the schools for that additional help. Classroom size reduction is another one.
How competitive are these grants? Are they?
They're not competitive. They're going to get their money, but that their district is based upon their formula. The application is more of a show us what you're going to do with it. It's not a competitive grant.
Okay, good.
They get their formula money.
All right.
Can I say something? One thing that may be a little bit different, though, is remember the state does have to have a plan for how calculations of disproportionality might be addressed. So I think something now could be in places where there are disproportionate rates in the access to effective teachers, what role might that Title IIA funding play if there are if once that is determined that there are some schools with higher rates of disproportionality than others. So that may be where it's a little more defined or at least discussed with the district than what has been done in the past.
Okay. Absolutely.
And I would just comment that this is an opportunity, that while we're presenting this to you, is you have the opportunity to weigh in as a group of what you think maybe Arkansas should do. Are there best practices that we could recommend, or is there something that we can put into our comprehensive state plan that, although there are allowable uses. Maybe there are things that we need to do specific to Arkansas. That, and that's why we're asking you to receive, this is a lot of information, I know, but we want you to have it, so then you, as the steering committee, can get feedback from your colleagues and from others, and bring things back to this table for conversation of, what are the things that you think would have the best bang for the buck across the state or within the districts, just leaving it open for you to help us as we develop the direction that we're going.
And I think what is going to help a lot, and I'm glad you said that, Commissioner Key, is that I was talking to Ms. Smith in the back. I want to provide you with the link to these non-regulatory guidelines, because when you read through them, it goes beyond what I'm presenting to you as far as this is the funding streams, the way it goes. It really gets down into some options and some guidance and things like that. So from this point forward, I feel like that we can get those non-regulatory guidances. They come and give you that link so you can read through those. I think that'll be a big help.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Lester or Ms. Pfeffer? All right. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.
Okay, last item on the agenda is next steps. Our next steering committee meeting will be November 30th. Certainly want to give you all an opportunity to weigh in with any feedback maybe you've received since the last meeting. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments they wish to share with the group? Okay. And don't want to miss an opportunity. I didn't get a sign-in sheet for anyone who may have signed in wanting to provide public comment, but is there anyone here still this morning who wants to make any public comment? Okay, I would encourage everyone to continue to promote from our website or webpage this work, and seeking out and recruiting those ambassadors and folks out there who have a passion, who want to be a part of the solution. And I, again, thank you all for your service on this steering committee. If there's nothing else to come before the committee, we're adjourned.